It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio, Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Monday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. And, of course, big shout out to everybody also listening on the RealAg Radio podcast. It is great to have you all here. Rain or shine or whatever kind of weather, you tune in, and I really appreciate it. Enjoy your feedback as well. Hey, it's Agronomic Monday today. That's right. So we're going to talk to Peter Wheat Johnson. He'll be here to talk about a whole bunch of issues. And we'll also be joined by Jeremy Boychyn of Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission. So we've got a great show. Oh, and some top ag news stories of the day as well on the back end of the show here today. If you have any feedback, we'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, or you can find us across all the different social media platforms. There also is a RealAg feedback line. The best way to this is a great way for me to hear what is on your mind. 855-776-6147. You dial that number, you press the number 3, and you leave me a message. 855-776-6147. Hey, I hope you had yourself a great weekend. It is a long weekend in the United States here today on this Monday, but it was Father's Day weekend, and so I hope you had yourself a great time. You got to spend some time with maybe your father, your grandfather, your kids. Maybe it was maybe it's your grandson, granddaughter, whatever it was. The big family gets together, throwing some barbecue. Maybe some on the smoker. We did that in the past. We talked about barbecue or smoker, and it's a bit of a divided issue for sure. I'm still rocking the barbecue, but we barbecued some steaks, did our part for Beef Demand, and a nice glass of wine. It was a lot of fun, and I got to spend it at the Baseball Diamond all weekend, which is where our family spends a lot of time for sure. It seems like it anyway. And it was really, really nice. So I hope you had yourself a great weekend as well. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to have Peter Wheat Johnson, and we're going to talk about all things agronomy. And I know this week he's hitting the road. He's doing some yen tours. We'll find out about that and a whole bunch of other stuff that he's up to. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
Advanced canola trait technology is here. And it's soon to be the talk of the town. Optimum Glide delivers excellent yield potential and agronomic trait performance. Improved crop safety. Enhanced weed control. And a wider window of application. You're going to want to see this. Learn more at OptimumGlide.ca.
How's your seed quality? What should you treat with? What about herbicide carryover and environmental concerns? Spring is here, and you've got a lot of things to think about in regards to your pulse crop. The Pulse School on Real Agriculture has information and advice for all these questions and more to help you navigate this season. Brought to you by BASF. Pulse School episodes are available at pulseschool.com, realagriculture.com, or as a podcast on your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Shaun Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on Sirius XM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Agronomic Monday. This segment's brought to you by Granubor from U.S. Borax. Ask for it by name. Go to borax.com. That is US Borax. Make sure you check out Granubor. Joining me right now here on Agronomic Monday, as always, is Pete Johnson. Pete, I hope you had yourself a great Father's Day.
It was awesome. Thanks, Shaun. Actually, my three boys, one of which is in the UK in Macclesfield, which is close to Manchester, we all got together and we played a virtual game of euchre. We haven't done that in forever, so that was just fun and cool. So a great Father's Day. Thanks, Shaun. I hope you did as well.
Very much did. Spent the weekend at the baseball field. My youngest had their home baseball tournament for their American Legion team, so it was a fun-filled weekend of American Legion baseball. And like I said at the beginning of the show, hope everybody had themselves a great Father's Day. Okay, Pete, boy, you know what? I know it's rained in Ontario, but for a good part of the other cropping regions, still begging for some rain. It's pretty tough out there.
Yeah, I mean, it really started to hit home in the last, I would say, 2 weeks, Shaun. And so you're right. Ontario got some rain. It started just about a week ago today, and it was about a week too late. So we have winter cereal crops, both barley and winter wheat. You know, my gorgeous winter wheat crop had so much potential. Man, it has burnt right up on the eroded knolls and on the tougher soils. Like, it is in tough shape. And I look at that and I start, whining. And then I look at some of the tweets. Boy, it is dry all across the U.S. Midwest, the Corn Belt. Michigan looks even drier than Ontario. Lots of that area has had less than an inch of rain in the last 30 days. At least southwestern Ontario, we got, in the range of an inch to even as much as 2 inches. So the corn and soybean crop here now is in decent shape for a little while. But yeah, and the ramifications, one tweet out of Wisconsin saying that the cover crop is just wiping him out. He's grown cover crops for 7 years, and this is the first year that he's seen a negative consequence. Farmer Tom 7, just like the cover crop used the early moisture that was there, and the Kansas farmers listening will know this, and actually a lot of Western Canada farmers as well. Like, the problem is when you're super short moisture and a cover crop uses some of that precious moisture, it can go all bad on the crop you're trying to grow. And that's sort of what we're seeing. And Shaun, the other side of the coin also exists. Like, it astounds me, but Al Frick out of northeastern Texas, 8 inches of rain, hail, extreme wind, green snap in the corn. Like, it's just, in the last 8 or 7 days, it's just been unbelievable moisture down there, and they were super dry, and now they're getting hammered the other way.
Yeah, I saw some tweets, Strathmore, Alberta, and I'm sure there's other places, but I saw the tweets from Strathmore, Alberta. It looked like it was snowing. There was so much hail falling. Like, the truck was going down the road, and there was like hail slush all over the place, just brutal. And the thing is, on the cover, you mentioned the cover crops and the cover crop mess in some of these parts. Who is this a shocker to, Pete? Who is surprised if you don't have moisture or a lack thereof, less than you planned, or just in general, that strategy doesn't work? Like, that's the whole reason we hear from a lot of farmers, especially as you move, I guess, west through the prairies, you get into Saskatchewan, Alberta. That's where a lot of farmers are like, it can't do it. It sounds like a good strategy. I would do that strategy. It makes sense to me. But there's this one really important component. It's called water. And I don't have it. And so, therefore, I can't engage in that strategy. So stop judging me for not using cover crops. Is that, or am I out of line?
No, so Shaun, I think the one thing that we're missing in that, and it really shows the difference between west and east, or the high rainfall areas and the low rainfall areas. So this whole concept of straw removal and organic matter return. And so if you're in a super dry climate, you need as much organic matter return as you can get. And a cover crop could help with that if it wasn't a moisture deficit. And in Ontario, I talk about, selling the straw. And I actually did a RealAg video a few years ago back, and I was talking about selling the straw and how in our data, we don't lose organic matter by removing the straw. And that's because we're so moist, so humid that straw breaks down so quickly that we don't see that difference. And oh my gosh, there's some farmers in Alberta and Saskatchewan that because I did not specify, I was talking about Ontario. And for you guys, returning that straw is part of building the organic matter and keeping the structure in the soil so that the moisture that is in there is actually available to the crop. So in a dry climate, the cover crop would be great because it would add to the structure. Living roots are better than leftover residue, 5 times better any day of the week. But if they use that precious moisture and you don't have enough, then you're 100% right. It does go against you. And it's a struggle because you'd like to get more living roots in the system, but man, they can really beat you up hardcore. And by the way, we have lots of growers here that will grow winter rye, cereal rye, or triticale as a forage crop. And they did that this year, and they harvested that crop, and they planted soybeans as a double crop. If it hadn't rained, that would have been an ugly scenario. Boy, there just wasn't moisture. So we're no different than anybody else. And we just got lucky enough to get that inch or at least a half an inch to 2 inches, or even a few areas like Texas with hail and 3 inches or 4 inches of rain. We have Lake Lambton back again. So Lambton County, very heavy clay, and South Lambton, they got 3 inches of rain very, very quickly. And it's just going to be hard on them because the soybeans are going to drown. And we're in good shape for the most part. But even within Ontario, I got to be careful because there's people out there that are not that blessed.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same way about Western Canada. There are areas that, when I talk to farmers on the Farmer Rapid Fire, who will be like, we're holding on. And then there's others not too far away from those same farmers who are in a real brutal situation. A couple weeks ago, I remember there's a farmer around Edmonton, and he was just bitter in terms of the lack of rain. And if you look on the map, it had rained all around him. Right? Which honestly, in the growing season, when that's happening, like I have seen so many tweets this growing season, maybe not more than usual, but they just really stick out this time of the year and it kind of tells you how people are begging for that rain because it's like, yep, thanks a lot forecast, right? I've got some other words that begin with F for you, forecaster, but that's the thing, right? There's a lot of areas right now that are looking to be bailed out big time by Mother Nature.
Yeah, absolutely. And many growers starting to talk about similarities to 1988.
Whoa, 88. Really?
Yeah. Were you even born then, Shaun?
Pete, I was. Yes, matter of fact.
Okay, so you were knee-high to a grasshopper in 1988. For old guys like me, it's kind of like, it's in 1988, and it's really interesting because we sort of have similar things happening in Ontario this year. It never rained basically from the 1st of May till the 17th of July was the first rainfall. And the soybeans that got into moisture on the 10th of May or the 5th of May when they planted them, they came up. The soybeans that didn't get the moisture sat in dry soil, and the corn as well. It happened with both those crops. And oh my gosh, on the 17th of July, I have pictures. If I went back to my slides, back then we took slides, right, with a camera. If I went back to my slides, I have pictures of corn in tassel at the same time as there was corn right beside it emerging, because it wasn't in moisture. So yeah, she's definitely an interesting year. And we're seeing lots of stuff. I mean, it's also, Shaun, like it just astounds me at how much, and my new terminology is a well timed rain solves many sins.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
You can see that, like in the corn crop. It's the corn crop after the rain. You'd say, "Yes, baby, we have made it." And then you look at it 3 or 4 days later, and you say, "That is the crappiest, most ragged, toughest-looking cornfield I have seen in my life. What goes on? I thought it all emerged uniformly." Oh, boy. And not all cornfields by any stretch. There are some amazing cornfields in Ontario, but there's a lot of cornfields. If uniformity of development means anything, we have left yield on the table. And it's just this microenvironment we talk about. So one corn plant, we just didn't smear the sidewall much, and it actually was in good moisture. They were all in good moisture. It got up and it was able to develop its secondary roots, its brace roots, if you will, nodal roots, call them whatever you like. But that's what it feeds off of after about the 5-leaf stage, the V2 stage, if you're into V stages, and 2 collars. I guess that's the proper term, 2 collars. So it was going, and it got that moisture and just exploded. Meanwhile, right beside it, a plant that was just that much wetter that you smeared the sidewall, and it got to that V2 stage and was trying to make those nodal roots, and it just couldn't do it. And so once the rain happened, it let those nodal roots get out of the trench and start to grow, but it didn't have root system to take off. And you got corn that's, I don't know, foot high, 16 inches high, beside corn that's 6 to 8 inches high. And that's not very uniform corn.
Yeah, I was talking about this last week, but saw a tweet from a farmer around Tabor, Alberta, on some of the dry land, and wheat heading out, and it was shorter than his boot, than his galoshes. That's
yeah.
I don't care how good your depth is. I don't care how good your spacing is. I don't care if you picked the right variety or not. I don't care if you did a really good job with post-emergence. If that's the outcome, it doesn't, those are things out of your control, right?
Yeah. Premium Ag tweeted out a similar thing from Southern Alberta and copied me in, and they said, "Hey, Wheat Pete, our wheat is going to head exactly when you suggest is the best. It's going to head out on the summer solstice so it can do grain fill during the longest days of the year." But the stuff was 10 inches tall, and it was heading out because of severe drought, and it's 3 to 4 weeks early of when it should head out. And it might be on the summer solstice, Shaun, but it ain't going to yield very good.
Yeah, it really sucks. There's no way to put it, but it sucks. Hey, Pete, we got to take a break. We've got more coming up here on Agronomic Monday right after this.
Boron is an essential micronutrient for plant growth, and without boron, your crops can't absorb the macronutrients they need for higher yields. Although borates occur naturally, boron deficiency is a common soil problem. Whether in direct soil application, through fertigation, or as a foliar spray, US Borax has the right refined product for your crops. US Borax products are specifically formulated to combine with other fertilizers, lowering your application costs. Learn more at borax.com/ag.
As you head out into the field this season, the Corn School's got you covered. Everything from tillage discussions, weed control info, field trial results, yield strategies, and more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Pride Seeds, BASF, and Syngenta Canada.
And welcome back back to RealAg Radio here on Agronomic Monday. This segment is brought to you by the Canadian Forage and Grasslands Association. They're inviting you to attend partnerships. That's farmer and cattlemen to hear great speakers like Rick Clark and Terry Aberhart, as well as a panel of farmers who are alleviating fertilizer costs by including cattle and cover crops into their grain farm rotations. Join us for lunch and exploring options for improved soil health at Canada's Farm Show, June 21st and 22nd in Regina. For more information or to pre-register for your free tickets, call 306-421-8538. Remember, you got to get some rain, too. As we were talking about that last segment. Terry Aberhart, great stuff. I love listening to Terry speak about things agronomic related for sure. We are talking with Peter Wheatpea Johnson, covering all things agronomy. Hey, Pete, you got a special guest this week that you're touring around with. This is pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, I couldn't be more excited, Shaun. And so Eric and Maxine Watson from New Zealand. Now, Eric and Maxine set the world record wheat yield twice, once in 2017 and then broke his own record in 2020. He just got bumped out of first by Tim Lamyman from the UK, but Eric's last record was 258.8 bushels per acre. They're coming to Ontario on holidays. Of course, as soon as they tell me they're coming, I've got them going on the Yen tour with us in Michigan on Monday, Tuesday. And it's interesting. Eric is coming. He wants to see wheat farms. So, boy, we are lining them up with wheat farms. And then they're going to end up touring through Quebec. And actually, their granddaughter is competing in the Mountain Bike Nationals in Pennsylvania. And so that's sort of the reason for their trip. But what an opportunity to get Eric here and to spend some time with him. And I couldn't be more excited.
Did you hijack his holiday?
You know, what's really interesting about a lot of farmers, Shaun, is that they really want to talk agriculture even when they're on holidays. And Maxine said, I'll go along with some of the agricultural stuff because I'm into it, but I wouldn't mind maybe hiking a few trails and, a few other more cultural things as well. Eric is just, I want to see wheat farms. So did I hijack it? Maybe a little bit, but under his direction, I hijacked it. I didn't do it without him requesting it.
You were an accomplice, is what you are.
Yes, that is exactly correct. I am an accomplice, 100%, man.
Leading some of our friends from overseas astray. There is no doubt about that. Okay, let's hit on. We've got some crop stress on the winter wheat on Ontario. Now, is this related to fungicides? What's going on?
Shaun, Vern and I did a great video, or what I thought was a great video, on T3 fungicides in a dry season on wheat here in Ontario and pretty much in the Great Lakes states. And there's good research to say, do we get as much yield response? No. But there's still yield response there. We still get the stay green, all right, the plant health benefit, particularly on the new fungicides with the SDHI component in them. SDHI fungicides have more plant health benefit than the other classes of fungicides, the strobies or the triazoles. And so a lot of growers, it's super dry in Ontario through the heading period, and the risk of fusarium is low. The amount of disease is low, and you kind of say, is it worth it? But the data suggests that it is. And so a lot of growers stayed the course, and it should be the right decision. But oh my gosh, when you have certain genetics, and it's a really unbelievably interesting story as we unravel it. But when you have certain genetics, or when you have wheat that is under severe drought stress, and remember in the first segment, I said that rain came 1 week too late. Our wheat was under severe drought stress in more of the field than we maybe recognized. That fungicide application really added to the amount of leaf tip necrosis. Certain varieties are just subject to leaf tip necrosis. The tips of the leaves basically die. They turn brown and they die. And it's related to rust resistance. So the varieties that seem to have better rust resistance tend to have more of this leaf death when it's super dry. Why that relationship exists, I'm not sure anybody knows. I know I don't know. Maybe smarter people like Dave Hooker or some of the wheat breeders, Eric Olson from Michigan, could tell us. But we're used to seeing a little bit of that leaf tip necrosis. But man, if that wheat field was under significant stress and you sprayed it with a fungicide, the amount of damage you got on a flag leaf was just harsh. And a lot of fields went from looking green as grass to looking very brown and yellow and not good at all. And it's disheartening when you do the right thing and you kind of see that amount of phytotoxicity from the fungicide. And you just go, man, oh man, who would have predicted that? And how would you have known that it would be this genetically specific as well?
Temporary, or is this a setback in yield?
So the really interesting thing, because we've seen this before, not maybe to this extent, not on this many acres, but we have seen where we would get some leaf injury from that T3 fungicide. And Shaun, if you looked at it, when you say yield is going to impact yield, you'd look at it and say, well, we just took that 100 bushel crop and turned it into a 20 bushel crop. Like it.
Okay. So it's significant. It visually looks terrible.
Right. It makes you sick when you look at it. And then it does come back a bit after a few days. Some of the leaf material may make a bit more green, but it doesn't come back anywhere close. And you still, like, even after a few days, you still say, well, there's 50 bushel yield loss there. That 100 bushels is 50 bushels. But when we look at the data, we'd actually say that most of the time, and man, never say never in this game, right? It's agronomy, it's biology. Strange things happen, but most of the time we just lose the benefit of the fungicide. We would expect a 5 to 8 bushel and sometimes much greater yield gain, but that's sort of on average. On a dry year, I think the 6 bushels per acre was what we talked about in the video, because that's what the research data supports. You get that leaf burn, then no, you lose that 6 bushels, and you might lose another 3, 4, 5 bushels. But it's not the 50 bushel yield hit that you think it is. Nonetheless, it's still a frustration because you did the right management. You should be getting more yield, and at best, you're taking the same amount of yield, and you might even take a yield hit. And that's kind of like, that just doesn't seem right.
So what are your thoughts? Like, because we probably have, so that's the experience in Ontario this year. There probably is a lot of growers, say, on the prairies that are trying to figure out, okay, I'm like in that sort of that no man's land of I'm dry, but if I got a timely rain, I'm saved. What do I do with the fungicide? Do you see a benefit to using a fungicide when you're kind of in that mid? Like, I know if you have no crop and you're looking at a gumboot stand, easy to say no. Okay, but then there's a whole bunch of acres, I'm sure. I can't quantify it, but there's a whole bunch of acres that are in that sort of like, you feel like you're in the gray area, like kind of no man's land sort of thing. Do you think a fungicide benefits that kind of situation?
Yeah, and that's exactly what we talked about, because we had a lot of acres in Ontario in that gray zone, yeah. and that's sort of that 6 bushel yield increase. And it also, like those SDHI fungicides actually help with your water use efficiency. And so if you could get them in without leaf injury, they actually should help increase yield more under dry conditions. And so, like, if you were a betting man and you had a reasonable expectation that if you got that rain, that's exactly the scenario that we had. There was rain in the forecast. We were under stress, but there was rain in the forecast. You say, boy, I think we still could get it. And we did get the rain. Then, yeah, I think you spray the fungicide. I will say for the growers in Western Canada that you don't generally get a lot of fusarium. And the data would suggest that when you're under those dry conditions, that probably the flag leaf fungicide, spraying it before the head comes out, the flag leaf fungicide will give you a little bit more boost than the T3 timing, the head spray timing. And I think that's because that plant health, as you come up to heading, keeping that plant photosynthesizing and going at its maximum has quite a bit of impact. And so when you don't have fusarium, I think the flag leaf fungicide, especially when you're on the dry side, makes better sense than waiting for the head spray fungicide. Here in Ontario, it's, T3 is kind of what we do. And and again, my Branson wheat, it's amazing, but it's got almost no burn whatsoever. It's an old variety. It's got great yield potential, even still. Some of the new Pioneer genetics that I think they have better yield potential, but they're the ones that got hit the worst. And so it really is this link. So, when you say, what should growers in Western Canada do, man, if you know that particular variety is more susceptible to the leaf injury, you might back off more. If you know you've got a variety that takes it well, then I think you stay the course, because I think the increased yield potential is real.
Well, and the other part about all this is we've learned from the past, don't give up on the crop too early, right? And it's easy for me to say, I don't have an acre planted. Okay. I'm just the guy who sits here behind the mic with a hot air every day, but we've learned from the past. You get you will feel much worse if you give up on this crop too early and that rain comes and you hurt yourself because there was things that were in your control that you screwed up. Right? There's still time.
10,000%.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, 10,000%. You're 100 like that. I can't tell you how many times that's happened. And I mean, it happened to me last year on the wheat crop. We gave up on it earlier than we should have. This year we did not give up on it. And, for a lot of us, I think that was the right decision, but there is more injury out there than I have ever seen before.
Yeah. Well, hey, you know what? This goes for the corn crop in the U.S. too, right? Like you mentioned, the markets have they did quite well last week, relatively speaking, and everybody's looking at this weather market. There still is time though for it. That's one of the things I think a lot of analysts are having a hard time sort of reconciling here, is that I know the farmer wants to see the market go up, but there's still now that rain's got to come soon. That's the other part about all of this, right? If the rain doesn't come, she all slides into the river, right? So the rain's got to come, but it still can come. I got a phone call from a farmer from Iowa on Friday, called in and mentioned just how dry and how poor their corn looked. So yeah, it's real out there for sure. So hoping some timely rains come here this week in the forecast. If it's forecasting rain, Mother Nature follows through on some of those promises from the forecaster. Hey, Pete, have yourself a great week. Enjoy Michigan, and can't wait to hear about it all next week and how it went.
Absolutely, Shaun. Thanks so much. And by the way, as the guy behind the mic with all the hot air, you do a pretty sweet job, man. Thanks for having me.
He drops that compliment right at the end. Thank you very much, Pete. I appreciate it. Hey, we'll be right back on Real Ag Radio. We got more coming up here on Agronomic Monday right after this quick break.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Whether you're seeding, harvesting, or anything in between, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has you covered. Timely agronomic information from industry experts available online anytime. Give your wheat crop a good start and a great finish with the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by C&M Seeds, Syngenta Canada, and the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission.
You know, prior we were talking to Peter Johnston there, and he's going to go on a bit of a tour this week down to Michigan, look at some wheat fields with one of the world record holders or former world record holders when it comes to wheat production. That is so farmer. Like, I bet you a high percentage of you listening have gone on a holiday. And when you've gone on that holiday has been centered around not going to museums, not going to the beach, not going to hang out at a local pub, seeing some of the local sites. You've gone to see some of the local sites. It's been another farm. I guarantee you, I almost promise you, you have done this. Even if your first response is, nope, never done. Oh, yeah, that's right. There was that. Yeah, okay. But it's just, that's what people do. I actually think it's one of the coolest things. I'm not being critical at all. I'm kind of making fun of it because it just you get a holiday away from your farm to go visit other farms. Like, right? It doesn't make any sense, but it's that connection and that's that learning and seeing stuff and what people are doing and how they're doing it. And the other part about it too that I think is so cool. There's the visiting farmer we kind of focus on here. It's when somebody just like I remember. Because our family was heavily involved in the Canadian Seed Growers Association. And I can remember, out of the blue, somebody would drive in a motorhome and say, hey, it's so-and-so from southern Manitoba. Is your grandfather here? No, yeah, no. Well, he's in Lethbridge. What can I do for you? And then they would tell you, oh, we're just happened to be driving through, and we saw the sign, and we know LK from the Canadian Seed Growers Association. Just want to stop in, and so you give them a tour of the seed plant, and it just it actually is kind of cool. I think it is one of the neat. Like that doesn't happen in the forestry industry. Hey, I'm on holidays. Can I check out your lumber mill? Doesn't happen. Oil and gas doesn't happen. At least I don't think so. It's one of the cool things about agriculture. It's the welcomingness. Like, of course you can come in. Of course I'll show you around. You want to go to field tour? Absolutely. Let's go look at some crops. Okay, we're going to talk about fungicide with Jeremy Boychyn of Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission. He was recently on a Wheat School episode. Now, you can find other Wheat School episodes by going to wheatschool.com. It is brought to you by Syngenta Canada, C&M Seeds, and Alberta Wheat Commission. Let's hear what Jeremy has to say about fungicides.
We are back with another Wheat School with RealAgriculture.com. We are here in central Alberta in a wheat field. Things are looking dry and hot, so we are waiting for rain. But we are here to talk about fungicide application on wheat. When should we be applying it? And how do we know we should be applying it? So first off, let's run through the scenarios of when could we potentially be applying a fungicide. There's a few different options where we're either already going over the field or we know there's potential value to applying a fungicide. So herbicide timing, PGR timing, flag leaf timing, or head timing. These are the 4 times where either we're already going over or there's potential value. In the research we've seen in Western Canada, in Alberta, and parts of the northern U.S., where application of a fungicide at that herbicide timing, so early timing, or PGR timing at that tiller timing, is really not providing a value for our yield or quality. What we see specifically with that PGR timing and research that Dr. Sherry Stridehorse has done in Alberta is that when we apply that fungicide at PGR timing, we actually will see a slight decrease in the amount of foliar disease on that crop. However, when we take that to the end, to the yield, it doesn't actually provide any yield benefit. And when it comes to fungicide at herbicide timing, we don't see a reduction in leaf disease, and we don't see an increase in yield. So those 2 options generally are not going to provide a benefit for your wheat crop. So looking at your flag leaf timing or your head timing are the two best options when it comes to getting the most out of your fungicide application. And going back to that research that Dr. Sherry Stridehorse did, so there's 8 locations in Alberta looking at AC Brandon and Viewfield and assessing what the impacts of different fungicide timing had on yield of those crops. They did it at 8 site years, and at 4 site years, they actually had a response. So those other 4 site years, there was actually no response to a fungicide application on that wheat. And we'll keep that in mind as we go through this, because not every year we're going to get a response to PGRs. But in those years we did see a response. It was the flag leaf and head timing where we did see a benefit of a fungicide application. Around 10 to 11 bushels added on to that crop when we applied a fungicide at those 2 timings, compared to no real benefit at the PGR and herbicide timing for those locations that saw a response. So we know we want to be applying at either flag leaf or head timing. And when we know that, then we can start to ask the questions, are we in the environmental situation for us to be applying a fungicide? And we have to ask ourselves a few questions there, and we'll go back to the disease triangle. I'm sure everyone has heard this before, but we need the pathogen, we need the environment, and we need the host. We have the pathogen in our field. Typically, it's going to be waiting there with the rotations that we have, sometimes at different levels, depending on the rotation that you have. So do we have the environment? Do we have that moisture? Do we have that rain? And also, do we have that yield potential to be taking and applying a fungicide to protect that yield as well? So what happens is generally we want to be aiming for that 4 to 6 inches of rain by that June timing, getting into June. That's typically where we start to see more disease development. Again, depending on your rotation, shorter rotations, we may see more disease development. And we want to be seeing that disease actually moving up the canopy as we're getting into that flag leaf timing. So scouting is going to be so important. Going in multiple times and asking the question of, is this disease moving up the canopy, and should I be protecting those yield-bearing leaves, which is the penultimate leaf, and majorly in the wheat crop is going to be the flag leaf. So if we see that disease and that foliar disease moving up the crop canopy and starting to jump onto our penultimate and flag leaf, we want to make sure we're getting out there and protecting our crop if we feel like the yield potential is there and the forecast is looking like we're going to continue to have wet conditions. So once we assess that, and once we know that we're getting into those situations where we should apply, those are the situations where we're likely going to see a better response out of our fungicide applications. And as I mentioned with Dr. Sherry Stridehorse's research, there's going to be situations where we just don't see the moisture and we don't see the disease pressure, where a fungicide application is going to provide a benefit. So then we ask the question of, should I be applying at flag leaf or should I be applying at head timing? And in general, what we saw with Dr. Sherry Stridehorse's research is that these can balance out, and if we delay to that head timing application, specifically if we're concerned about Fusarium head blight, and this is going to depend on your field history and what you've seen for Fusarium head blight on your field, delaying to that Fusarium head blight timing for a fungicide application can have equal yield benefit in a disease situation as compared to applying at flag leaf. So aiming for those 2 different timings is going to depend on either your foliar leaf disease pressure or your Fusarium head blight pressure and where you want to mitigate risk on your crop. And then you ask the question of, should I maybe be applying at both timings? And in general, what we've seen is, although we see a bit of a disease decrease when we do applications at both timings, the economic return of doing that is not worth it. So,
like Jeremy Boychyn of Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission says, you really have to look at where the biggest risks are for your fields and your farm, and target 1 or 2 of those timings when it comes to fungicide application. Some of you listening are going to be like, hey, I definitely know I need to use a fungicide this year in Western Canada. And some of you are going to be like, no. And then there's those that, like we were talking about with Peter Johnson. There's some people, when I would just call it the gray area, the mushy middle, no man's land, really trying to head scratch and sort of figure this out. So tough decisions, like always, during any growing season, whether it's too wet, too dry, too hot, too cold, and a whole bunch of other variables. There's always tough decisions in the growing season, and we do our best to minimize the negative impact at all times. That's the way I would look at it, right? All we're trying to do is minimize the negative impact, to try to hold as close as we can to that positive yield as possible. We'll take a break. We'll be right back with more here on Agronomic Monday. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio, 147 Sirius XM.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
We've got a really new cool series launching at RealAgriculture.com. It's called RealAg Shops. The part here, though, is we need you to participate. Do you have a cool shop? Maybe it's a brand new one. It's all swanky and clean and nice, and you wouldn't mind somebody like Real Agriculture doing a video series. Or maybe it's a shop that you've retrofitted. Maybe an old dairy barn. It's one of those old Quonsets. You've done some renos and made it very, very workable when it comes to doing your on-farm maintenance and getting ready for the upcoming growing season or harvest or whatever have you. If you're pulling wrenches and you want us to focus on your shop, make sure you send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. And RealAg Shops is brought to you by Princess Auto. So really looking forward to that series being launched here in a very short period of time in July. New series starting, RealAg Shops. Stay tuned for that. Let's get to the top ag news stories of the day. Canada now has a population of 40 million people. Amazing. Just not too long ago, we were actually at about like 34, 35. You sort of throw out that number. Well, we actually grew by 1 million people the past year. Canada's population growth rate currently stands at 2.7%. That's the highest annual growth rate since 1957, when Canada was in the middle of its post-war baby boom, according to Stats Can. Now, Maddie Sidamaki, director of the Infrastructure Institute and professor at the Department of Geography and Planning at the University of Toronto, said the population milestone presents opportunities and challenges for Canada. There is clearly a challenge, I guess you would say, when it comes to things like infrastructure. And the big one would be affordable housing, especially if some of those people that are moving to Canada are trying to live around some of the larger cities. Good luck. Have fun with that. There already is a shortage, and so some people being critical of some of the immigration policy based on the fact that we're not really set up yet for this kind of growth. But others saying we're never going to be ready, and there's a race to basically bring in and recruit as many possible immigrants as possible. As you know, Globe and Mail's John Ibbotson talks about the fact that this isn't an unlimited supply, and so Canada really needs to focus on this recruitment now and can't afford to wait till all the perfect pieces are in place. So 40 million people in Canada as of now. EPA will finally decide by June 21st on its RFS RVOs. That's the mandates, the renewable volume obligations for 2023, 24, and 25. The deadline is for the EPA to decide, not necessarily to announce on this date. So although they're going to decide by the 21st, which is in just a couple days, we may not actually hear what some of those volumes. And I said this on AgriTalk on Friday. I don't get why they wouldn't go public with the number. Why create an environment where there's going to be a whole bunch of speculation on what those obligations are, those volumes? The renewable diesel industry, for example, is being built around what these RVOs could possibly be. Why would they not want to be transparent about what they actually are? So there's going to be a lot of focus on this on the 21st, which is on Wednesday. Chinese President Xi Jinping met with top U.S. diplomat Anthony Blinken in Beijing on Monday as the two superpowers seek to put relations back on track after they were derailed by a Chinese spy balloon earlier this year. It was reported on Friday that Secretary of State Blinken was actually not going to meet with President Xi of China and was instead going to meet with some of his underlings. And so people were questioning really why go through that, and was this some sort of embarrassment that China was trying to put the U.S. through? That it was not the case. Washington has been keen to downplay expectations, with officials saying that any talks would be progress enough. The meeting with Mr. Xi at the Great Hall of the People was confirmed at the last minute, but could indicate that China is keen to put an end to the often fiery rhetoric of recent months and return to the optimism following a summit between Mr. Xi and U.S. President Joe Biden in Indonesia last year. Part of this one thing to watch is, does the U.S. remove some of these tariffs on China, and what the timeline is for that. We heard last month from former USTR Robert Lighthizer talking about how he would double the tariffs, not remove them. So we'll definitely have to watch what exactly USTR Catherine Tai does with those tariffs. Retail sales growth in Canada is continuing to outperform much of the world so far this year, a sign of the ongoing resiliency of the Canadian shopper despite higher inflation and recession predictions a new report has found. The Collier's 2023 Retail Outlook said consumers are still spending, even though retail sales have cooled slightly from last year, when prices spiked and interest rates began their meteoric ascent. Canadian retail sales climbed 2.4% in March compared with the same month a year earlier, outperforming most developed markets around the world, according to the Collier report. In comparison, U.S. retail sales edged up only 1.6%, while dropping in the UK, France, and Germany, according to that same report. From a crop condition standpoint, we were talking agronomics a little bit earlier here in the show, of course, on Agronomic Monday, but Alberta crop conditions are well below the 5- and 10-year averages as hot, dry conditions continue to erode soil moisture in the province, according to a report from GrainFox. Friday's weekly crop report pegged the average condition of all crops in the province at just 43% good to excellent as of Tuesday, compared to 76% for the 5-year average and 74% for the 10-year average. Last year at this time, crops were rated 75% good to excellent. So we're at 43% in Alberta. And some of the moisture that has come here in the past week has been in the form of hailstones, as we were discussing. Banff actually has a snowfall warning today, if you can believe that. So, yeah, Alberta doing its kind of weather sort of things. And we have seen the markets react to some of this dryness. We'll get to that in a second. Field crops in general across Ontario are doing well and welcome the rain of the past few days, according to the latest OMAFRA field crop report. The need for moisture is coming up as corn begins rapid growth. Winter wheat looks good across the province, although has been impacted by dry conditions in areas. And mentioning the dryness, that's a big issue in the Midwest. Corn and soybean futures tacked on more big gains to end last week and now are trading at multi-month highs, according to GrainFox. Dry weather in large portions of the American Midwest is buoying corn and soybean futures. Friday's particularly sharp gains were also attributed to forecasts for rising temperatures this past weekend into next week, which is expected to further increase stress on crops in early stages of development. So if you're looking for that weather rally, it seems to be a little bit of motion. The big question for you is, do you take some risk off the table or do you let it ride? I'll let you figure that out. We're also seeing a bit of a bump here in canola as well. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Or you can call the RealAg feedback line. The number is 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio, and we will chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.